The Jersey Swap podcast is sponsored by Apollo Home. Yeah, the season's starting, but it's still colder outside. Colder than the reception the Red Bulls are going to get at TQL Stadium this year. To start the year, Apollo Home are bringing back their $29 heating tune-up, so don't miss out on this advantage. Call Apollo Home or get online to schedule an appointment at apollohome.com. Okay, CSTers, it's time for another Jersey Swap podcast. This one is the first opponent-centric installment of the year. We take our time to talk with the guests of our rivals to get the inside scoop. But in the end, we're all just friends celebrating the beautiful game, hence the name of the podcast. We have a lot of high expectations this year throughout the league. And if you follow our next guest, the next step for your team is an MLS Cup. I'm talking about the New York Red Bulls. We have Daniel Rebain from the Area Sports Network back to talk about energy drink soccer in the Northeast. Daniel, welcome to the show again.
Hey, thanks for having me back. Second time on the show, and I'm glad to be here. This, new season 2025. Short off season for me specifically with the Red Bulls, but I'm fired up to get back and going this year.
Yeah, that's true. You guys a longer than expected postseason. That's for sure. I mean, does that really linger with you a little bit in terms of like just the excitement from the postseason being longer?
Yeah, I think when you kind of don't have like you have an unexpected run to the final, and then bittersweet you lose 2-1 on the road. But I think it kind of gives you that taste that this team has that ability to get there, and with a short, quote unquote short off season to MLS standards, I think you get right back into it. The team's re-energized. They've brought in a bunch of players that we'll talk about soon, but I think this team is ready to go, and a hot start to the season is what they need to get back to MLS Cup.
I think all of us could use a hot start to the season. It is butt cold out there. Kind of feel fortunate that we got the chance to go down to Honduras to play our first international game, and not the center of the frozen snowball that we know.
Kansas City last night. Oh man.
Yeah, that was a rough to look at that, but hopefully it's a little warmer. I'm not expecting it to. I think it's going to be probably in the low 30s, high 20s maybe. So I hope we're all long sleeve shirts. Bundle up, everybody. But let's go right straight into talking about Red Bull's season from last year. I mean, you can't get any higher than you have unless you win the entire ball of wax. Looking back, you started real hot in the season. 8 wins, 5 draws, and 4 losses, but you did have to dig out quite a bit in the second half. There were a little bit more, little bit more goals that have been scored by the opposition before you could dig out from that. Was it merely just Emil Forsberg not being 100%? Was there any sort of reason for that second half stagnation?
Yeah, it might be a coincidence, but when he went down with his foot injury, Emil Forsberg, around June 1st, around that time, that's when Red Bulls kind of took a nosedive to their season. Draws became losses. Wins became draws at home. For the longest time, they couldn't win at home. They would only get draws. And, I think him going out, the team lacked playmaking ability, and it showed on the field. Goal scoring took a dive. So I think him getting back to that for that playoff run was a big boost for the team offensively. And, obviously they were a great defensive team last postseason, but I think, getting the goals where they scored them, was a big part of Emil Forsberg and his presence on the field.
Yeah, I mean, Emil Forsberg was definitely the big name, but you also had Lewis Morgan, Dante Van Zier, who's no longer with the team, was still producing, especially when he played against us.
Yeah.
Who do you feel got hot at the right time, other than just having Forsberg's presence in the postseason?
I think you brought up Dante's name. He struggled to score goals in the regular season, but when the time was right, when the games mattered the most, he showed up in the playoffs, and he scored a couple of goals. I think the defense kind of heated up. That was the time where Red Bull transitioned from their normal 4 at the back to 3 at the back system, and for whatever reason, it started clicking in the playoffs. They were getting clean sheets throughout their run, and it was working. Everything seemed to work until they got to the final. Andres Reyes goes out for whatever reason, pregame, injury, sickness, and that's kind of what nosedived their final run. Unfortunate situation there, but I think that run inspired a lot of fans to what Red Bull has cooking this offseason, and they're excited for this year.
Yeah, I think looking back at like what happened with Reyes not playing that last game and then ultimately being claimed by San Diego in the offseason, I feel that a little bit. I definitely feel that for maybe the USL years when we've had a few players who, beyond their control, they weren't able to make it to a game and got eliminated, and then in the offseason were gone. So I feel that pain. I feel that we could really had some pieces that we could have used. And you look at Matt Miazga, the last few years where we really could have used him to go further in the playoffs.
Yeah, I think Reyes for himself was a very volatile player. One game he could be the best player and best defender in the league. The next he could get a red card for making a stupid tackle. But credit to him, he played his role perfectly in that center of the 3-back, and it worked. Everything was working defensively. It was cooking. They were getting the goals they needed. They would score. Get 1-0 results, 2-1 results, 2-0 results. They were able to lock it down in the back. But when you unexpectedly you're missing one of your better players in that run, and he goes down with 5 minutes until game time, you're kind of flustered, and that's kind of what happened to Red Bull. They were down 2-0 just like that to start the game, and they tried to mount a comeback. They got a goal in that first half, but they weren't able to get that second goal, and ultimately LA Galaxy won the title again.
Yeah, and that's a good transition point. Let's talk from what the team looked like last year to this year. Obviously, you lost Reyes in the offseason. You lost John Tolkien as well. He's been transferred to the Bundesliga. What players do you expect to step up on defense this year?
Yeah, they actually made a bunch of moves this year defensively. I think, bringing in a guy like Tim Parker just brings in veteran presence that knows the league himself. He's not that type of player where he needs to start every game anymore, but he's that solid guy where if he needs to be called upon, he's ready to go. And then you bring in a guy like Alexander Hack from the Bundesliga, and he played in the Saudi Pro League last year, but played under Sandro Schwarz when he was coaching in Mainz. He knows his system. He's played a bunch of games in the Bundesliga. I think the only thing he might lack is pace in the back, but everything else, his passing ability, his aerial presence. He scored two corner goals this preseason. I think defensively they have the players. The only question is at the back is speed, and sometimes they'll get caught on a counter, an over top ball. But I think when you bring in guys like Hack, like Tim Parker to play with a Sean Nealis, Dylan Nealis in the back, I think that only bodes well for the defense going forward this year.
Yeah, I think the good thing that you have with Tim Parker coming back, yes, he's a little older, 31 years old, so is Hack. But you've got that experience. You've got that connection to either Red Bull Soccer or the head coach, Sandro Schwarz as well. To have that experience really says something. But you're also bringing in a lot more experience on the attack as well. Can you maybe give us a quick rundown of who else has joined New York to sort of brush up on this attack that really helped them out in the postseason?
Yeah, you brought up Dante Van Zier, obviously transferred back to the Belgian Pro League. They also traded Elias Manuel, who's been up in the news lately, not for the best news, but he was traded to RSL. And then they brought in Eric Maxim Choupo-Moting, formerly of Bayern Munich and PSG, as a free agent, and he's scheduled to lead the attack this year with Lewis Morgan. And I think that combination up top, Choupo-Moting brings a bunch of experience, winning the Bundesliga, winning, Champions League, having all those experiences in France and England. He brings that with him to MLS. And he said yesterday at media today, he was looking for a new challenge, and Red Bull gave him that in MLS. So I think he's really motivated to play with a guy like a Lewis Morgan next to him, who, won comeback player of the year last year after a major hip injury. I think they're going to be able to score goals this year, especially with a guy like Emil Forsberg playing right behind them.
Now, would you compare the likes of Choupo-Moting? Would you expect him to sort of be like your Bradley Wright Phillips from a few years ago, where he comes in with experience, maybe not necessarily the numbers underneath him, but still something to prove?
Yeah, I think, obviously he's an older player nowadays, but I think he brings that target striker that Red Bull is missing. His hold-up play has been excellent this preseason. His tactical ability is also really good. So obviously he won't be able to play every single game, but I think his presence on the field and in training, in games, I think, just his presence alone is going to, push this team forward in the attack more often than not. I think, having a guy like Lewis Morgan next to him to play off of him with his quality as well is going to, springboard this team to maybe the late 2010s where Red Bull is one of the more attacking scoring teams in the league.
Well, I mean, you definitely have somebody with a good resume underneath him. You can also argue he had probably his best year as a pro, maybe just a few years ago for Bayern.
Yep.
I think 22, 23, maybe 30 matches, 17 goals.
Yep.
That's nothing to sneeze at for, a big time team within the Bundesliga, especially at Bayern Munich. And then, having the presence of mind to contribute to a team that's constantly winning and bringing in trophies. It's definitely something I think that New York needs more of, to sort of, dangle in front of opponents and say, we've got somebody who's performed and has proved it.
Yeah, and that's another thing. Obviously Red Bull made it to MLS Cup last year, but they couldn't get it. They couldn't, do what they needed to win. And bringing in a guy like Choupo-Moting, who's basically won everywhere he's gone, other than in England. Obviously, he was playing with Stoke, but playing at PSG, playing at Bayern Munich, he's learned how to win those type of games. So having a guy like that, maybe he's not going to score 25 goals like all these big time names in MLS are gonna do this year, but he's going to score big goals in the playoffs. When it matters most, he will show up, and that's kind of the player that Red Bull has been missing the last few years.
Yeah, I did some quick math, and talking about Choupo-Moting, talking about Emil Forsberg already being there, and then bringing in Tim Parker, Alexander Hack, who are both in their early 30s. It definitely feels like, if you looked at the average age of this current team, that they're starting to progress away from being the youngest squad in the league. I think that they've been like 21 years old as an average for the longest time, and now they're climbing up a little bit. I think their average is closer to 24 now. Do you feel that this was a necessary change from Schwartz to make them older and more experienced?
Yeah, they talked about this at the when they were wrapping up the season. Head of sport Jochen Schneider talked about bringing in more experience to this team. Obviously, Red Bull is known for making young signings, bringing up players from the academy, and that's what they've done the last couple of years. And maybe that's cost them success in the playoffs. But I think they want to build around that young talent now, and bringing in a guy like Hack with all this experience in the Bundesliga, bringing in a guy like Eric Choupo-Moting, bringing in a guy like Emil Forsberg. These guys have real experience when the games matter most, when there's pressure on you. So bringing in guys like that to a locker room like Red Bull already had, I think, it just bodes well with what they can do going forward. And I think Sandro Schwarz is set up to do something this year. Maybe not get back to MLS Cup, because obviously it's hard to win in the playoffs. But they're gonna make a real push in Open Cup, Leagues Cup, and MLS Cup as well.
Now, we've always referred to the Bulls as the baby Bulls sometimes when you're talking about it. New York Red Bull 2. we've seen our share of them, but even though they're going into the season with a lot more experience, a lot more age within the lineup, are there any youngsters that you feel can really make a difference coming into this team this year?
Yeah, and we've seen it the past couple of years with him in midfield, but Daniel Edelman is the guy in midfield for Red Bull. He is their current Tyler Adams. Maybe not up to the level of Tyler Adams is for the national team, but he is that guy for Red Bulls with, cleaning, making tackles, being defensively sound. He is that guy, and he's still a young guy. Obviously he's really motivated to excuse me, to get back to MLS Cup. He was really, hurt. Obviously, he's from Warren, New Jersey. He is Red Bull through and through. So for him to get that kind of break, that 70-day break for him to recharge his batteries, I think he's really motivated to come in this year. And then also on tag, Julian Hall, set to turn 17 years old. He's going to have a bigger role this year. Obviously, Dante Van Zieren, Elias Manuel go out the door, but they bring in Eric Choupo-Moting, and we'll talk about him more, Victor Bogash as well, a young Polish striker. Other than that, those three guys, not much more attacking depth behind them. So they're going to need a Julian Hall to play some games this year for them in Open Cup, Leagues Cup, and some MLS games. So whenever he gets his opportunity, he's going to need to take it.
I'm kind of glad you brought up Julian Hall. I think they covered like the top 10 like biggest expectations to come out of like the academy for this season. Julian Hall was one of them. I definitely want to bring up also our guy, Stefan Chirilla, 17 years old as well. I think give him a few more years, and if they aren't sold off to Europe, I could see a rivalry blossoming between both of these guys. If not playing in MLS Next Pro, definitely playing on the pro levels.
Yeah, I think, obviously we've had rumors about Barcelona possibly bidding $10 million for Julian Hall this winter. I don't know how true those are. Obviously, Spanish reports sometimes are hit and miss. So we'll see. Obviously, he's one of the biggest talents in U.S. soccer. He's a dual national, Polish-American as well. So if he wanted to go abroad right now, he could go abroad right now. He's got the passport to do it. We'll see what happens there. But I think, his talent is there to make an impact on this team. As the year goes on, I think the only thing with him is maturing physically, and he's starting to do that. He's already almost 6 foot. It's just about building up muscle, his speed, his man speed as well. Because we see what he does when he plays against his own age group, he dominates. So once he's able to get that speed with him in MLS, I think a lot of teams are going to find it difficult defending him.
Yeah, hearing him and his talent range and really what he could become in a year or two, it really, I think, is starting to turn me into wanting to see if he stays on Red Bulls too, and he still does a few routes and comes into town. I want to go to that game, FCC 2 and Red Bulls 2. It'll sort of bring back the USL years a little bit for us. It'd be nice to see that. But let's definitely focus more on what this upcoming game is going to look like. First one of the season. So I think while we've seen a little glimpse of what Pat Noonan wants to play, who he wants to start, maybe we haven't seen that yet from Red Bulls. So I guess, are you seeing more of like a 3-4-1-2 lineup where you've got, the sort of like the three-headed juggernaut up at the top? Well, how do you see their lineup rolling out?
Yeah, it's been a bit a mix here. First, they started down in Florida, IMG Academy, where it seemed like they were running their normal 4 at the back. But when they went out to Coachella Valley for the tournament out there, it seemed like they were going with the 3 at the back. And it's kind of a mix between a 3-4-3, a 3-4-1-2. It's, they're interchangeable up top. But I think they might start the season with 3 at the back, which could be interesting. As we brought up before, the speed of the defense is not the best, but I think the technical ability, the IQ is there for them to overcome any challenges there. But yeah, I think 3-4-3 3-4-1-2 is what we'll see us on Saturday.
Yeah, I think we'll probably see two teams trying to probably outline up each other with the same formation.
Yeah.
Definitely we'll see a 3 in the back, I think, with FC Cincinnati. Still a few injuries that we're trying to overcome. Do you see any major absences in this first match?
Yeah, I think the only thing we'll see is we possibly won't see Felipe Carballo. He hasn't been present for most part this preseason. He hasn't played any preseason games. I believe he's been in training. So apparently he was dealing with appendicitis at the end of last season, which just came to light yesterday at media day. He was also dealing with a major foot injury in the final, which also he didn't play. So we'll see if he's available. He's probably the only one that would be missing, other than Marcelo Morales, who they brought in at left back as well. He just got his visa approved, so obviously, he was chilling down in Chile during the summer that they have down there. So I don't believe he'll be ready. So I think those would be the only two major misses, unless I'm missing anybody.
Okay, well, let's go into this game and sort of see if we can get like just a feeling on how we feel it's going to roll out. From the FCC side, I think we're expecting, once again, Matt Miazga, Nick Hagland, they're still recovering from their injuries. So they're not going to be ready for a few more weeks from what we understand. It sounds like Luca Orishano might not be playing. We're not quite sure. It was a coach's decision for him not to fly down for the CCC matchup in Honduras. So it's a matter of, how fit, how ready some of these players are. But other than that, I think the lineup that you saw in Honduras at the end is probably going to be about the same. I think you're going to get as healthy as you can before you start bringing in the likes of Matt Miazga. So let's ask the big crystal ball here. This is the first one. It's gonna be the hardest one to ask. We have the Growler Cup every year, which we ask our Patreons. If you go to CincinnatiSoccerTalk.com/Patreon, you can become a member. We ask them what they think the results of these games are going to be, win, loss, draw, what the score is. Let's ask you, Daniel. How do you feel this matchup's going to turn out? Now, the caveat is you guys have been beating the pants off of us every time you've come into TQL Stadium.
Yeah, that obviously we won't have Frankie Maya this time.
Oh, that's too bad. That's
too bad. So he won't help us there. But yeah, you bring up a good point. We've had a lot of success recently in Cincinnati, but going off what I've seen in preseason, I think Red Bull might be a bit susceptible if they run 3 at the back. I think they'll be able to get their own goals as well. So I'm going to call it a 2-2 draw.
That sounds pretty consistent from what I'm looking at. I really think that we're losing the number, I think, in terms of how we can defeat the Red Bulls at home. We had a year where, when we got far into the playoffs and had the supporter shield, we were able to figure out Red Bull. Last year we weren't. And so that sort of makes me a little cautious going into this game. I still think that we haven't seen the full firepower. So I'm going to be positive. I have to be positive getting out the gate here. I'm going to say a 2-1 victory for FCC. But it's going to be one of those games where we're biting our fingernails in the first half. We don't know what our defense is really looking like until we're able to settle everybody down and get the connections in offense to give us maybe an early goal and help us buffer things along the way.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a dogfight, putting it lightly. I think, both these teams, certain players might not like each other on either side. So I think a rivalry has been brewing for a long time. A bunch of times we've met in certain competitions, playoffs, regular season. So I think, it's going to be a fight on the field. And I think goals are going to be scored. And I think it's going to be an entertaining game for game 1 of the year in MLS for both teams. So I'm excited. MLS is back. 2025 is here. But again, I think Red Bull is going to start it off with a draw. And a lot of draws they had last year. I think draws will favor them at certain points this year.
Now I actually have Red Bulls, I think 6th or 7th. in my year-end table, let's call it, what do you feel I mean, obviously I would say the ceiling is MLS Cup or bust, but maybe what do you see in terms of like what the floor could look like with this team?
Yeah, I think, every year the floor is playoffs. I think that's what fans have always said. That's what the team has always said. They're still on their historic run of making the playoffs for all
That's
these
true.
years. So I think the floor is just playoffs. Make good runs in both U.S. Open Cup and Leagues Cup. But for me, a great year or a good year would be, top four, anywhere in the top four. Making a final in one of the cup competitions. I would necessarily wouldn't say you'd have to win. Just getting there would be good, but I think they could win if they eventually do get there. And then winning a round in the playoffs, because obviously, winning in the playoffs is hard. We've all seen it. Not every team is going to win every single year. So winning a home playoff series would be fantastic for me. Obviously, most fans and most pundits would expect more from coming off a season like Red Bull did, but that was unexpected. Obviously, most teams are going to have targets. The Red Bulls are going to have a target on their back now. That teams know that they're here and they're ready to battle. So I think once you get to the playoffs, anything can happen. So if you can get one series win, you can get to the potential conference final. I think with all the success that I talked about in season, because Red Bull is going to have a bunch of games this year. So if they can get to a final, conference final of the playoffs as well, I think that would be a good season.
Yeah, and if you guys get the good fortune of facing your rival in the conference finals like we did, I know you guys faced them in an earlier round, and I'm talking about New York City FC. If you guys get to face them in the final, that would be outstanding as well.
We're undefeated against them in knockout competition, so that would favor us very well.
Yeah, I mean, as much as I'm originally from the Boston area up in Massachusetts. We have our rivalries with the Yankees.
Yeah,
To see the likes of two New York teams playing against each other, it's almost like a sort of a cage match that you have really you don't have a name that you're pulling for. You just want to see entertainment for the highest. So I'm pulling for that. I want to see more of that, especially if it means one of you knock out the other before we go on.
Yeah, I think if they ever had a conference final, the New York Derby in the conference final, we see normal games to have on and off the field fights. So I couldn't imagine what a conference final would be, at Sports Illustrated Stadium, now that it's called, or
that's right,
or Citi Field. So it's that would be very interesting, twist to 2025.
That's right. You guys renamed it to Sports Illustrated Field, which boggles my mind even more.
Still Red Bull Arena. Still, most people are going to call it Red Bull Arena, but Sports Illustrated Stadium, it's going to get some used to. So
yeah. Anyways, I want to thank you for joining us in our maiden voyage for the MLS season itself. These little team by team parcels that we have during the year. Floor is yours. Let us know how things are, what you're working on, and where we can find you on social media.
Thank you very much. Obviously, I'm excited to be here for the second time. You can go follow me on X at Daniel Rebain, just my name, or PVT McBain. You can find my written work at Area Sports Network, and then you can also find some YouTube videos that I posted on YouTube as well. I'm forgetting the channel already. So if you just want to link it, that'd be fine. I'll send it to you.
Well, we'll definitely include it in the link with this. We'll also show this on YouTube. We're starting to do more video presentations. I'm hoping that people are enjoying seeing myself, the guest, my lazy cat in the background. I hope that people are starting to enjoy it, and I hope that people continue to enjoy it. It's always a fortunate blessing to be able to do this for you guys and to bring on guests like Daniel. So if you want to see more of this, definitely go to our website at cincinnati-soccer-talk.com. Listen to us on your favorite podcasting platform, or follow us on Cincy Soccer Talk on your favorite social media device. Hey, Daniel, thank you very much for joining us, and keep your kit clean.
Thank you very much, sir.